Crash! A display shelf collapses as Jason Statham hurls a man through a wall of candy bars and bottled soda. Glass shatters across the aisle. The store's cold fluorescent lights flicker, casting sharp shadows against the freezer doors. Blood mixes with melting ice near the broken ice cream cooler. A second man lunges from the back, armed, desperate. Jason turns before he fully rounds the corner. One strike, clean, sharp. The man drops with a dull thud. Now only one remains, the tall one, the one with the pistol. The one trembling as Jason approaches. Slow, unhurried, boots crunching glass with every step. Jason doesn't raise his voice. He simply says, "All this because you picked the wrong cashier." 12 minutes earlier, it was just another quiet stop. Jason Statham walked into the corner store wearing worn jeans, a black hoodie, and the kind of calm that made people move aside without realizing why. The overhead bell chimed. One glance and the cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, smiled politely. There were only 3 other customers inside. A man near the freezer pretending to pick snacks, another near the back door texting, and a third pacing between the aisles with a slouched posture and wired nerves. Jason noticed them. He always did, but he wasn't there to interfere. Just a bottle of water and a breath of silence. He walked up to the counter. The cashier tried to stay professional, but her hand trembled slightly as she scanned the bottle, not enough to alarm a normal man. But Jason noticed the beads of sweat near her temple, the way her eyes flicked toward aisle 3 and stayed there too long. She handed him the bottle, then the receipt, folded, slightly too thick. Jason felt it instantly, a second layer inside. He opened it slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "Please help me, he has a gun. I can't scream, he's watching." Jason didn't react, didn't blink. He nodded once like any customer would, then turned around, unscrewing the cap, taking a sip as he walked toward the snack aisle. He passed the man in the hoodie, aisle 3. Nervous. Eyes darting. The fake shopper near the back door shifted his weight, a bulge under his coat that didn't match the weather. A security camera in the corner blinked red, turned off. Jason took a bag of peanuts and studied the label, all while moving slowly past the front cooler. There, in the reflection of the glass, he saw the third man slide his hand inside his jacket. They were about to move. They thought Jason was just a man running errands. He made his way toward the cold drink aisle again, slipping his free hand into his hoodie pocket, where a small tactical blade sat snug against the lining. He wasn't armed for war, but he didn't need to be. Jason paused near the freezer and knelt to check a bottle on the bottom shelf. Behind him, the first man started walking, and that's when the trap snapped shut. Jason exploded from his crouch, spinning with the freezer door, slamming it into the approaching man's face. Blood sprayed. The man fell, dazed. Jason yanked his collar and hurled him backward into the display, shattering everything in a 2-meter radius. The second man drew a pistol, too late. Jason kicked a crate into his knees, knocking him off balance, then closed the gap and crushed his ribs with 2 lightning-fast strikes. The cashier ducked beneath the counter, hands over her mouth. The third man stood frozen, gun shaking in his hand. Jason locked eyes with him. He didn't raise his voice. "All this," he said calmly, "because you picked the wrong cashier." The man opened his mouth, maybe to threaten, maybe to beg, but Jason was already moving. The fight wasn't long. It was decisive. Jason dropped the third man with a blow that shattered the candy rack behind him. The pistol clattered across the tiles and slid toward the counter. Jason kicked it under a shelf. Silence fell. Only the buzzing of a broken fridge fan remained. The cashier slowly rose, eyes wide, lip trembling. Jason walked to the counter, calm as ever, picked up his receipt and handed it back to her. "You dropped something," he said. She took it with both hands, unable to speak. Outside, sirens echoed faintly. Someone had triggered the alarm after all. Jason looked once toward the broken front doors, then toward the girl. "You okay to talk to the cops?" She nodded slowly. Jason gave her a last look, not warm, not cold, just measured. Then he turned and walked out, leaving behind 3 men on the ground, a shattered convenience store and a cashier who had trusted the right stranger. The alley behind the convenience store smelled like oil and rot. Jason Statham stood by the side door, crouched low, his eyes locked on the van parked across the street. It was matte black, no plates, engine still running. He hadn't left the neighborhood. He couldn't. Because the tattoo on the neck of the third man, a crooked circle with a jagged line through it, wasn't just ink. It was a signature. Jason had seen it once before, a warehouse in Istanbul, two dead assets and a sealed crate that never made it to customs. The kind of mark you didn't forget. This wasn't a stick-up, it was a warning, and he was the message. Jason moved fast. He crossed the street and approached the van from its blind side. No hesitation. One hand reached for the door, the other tightened into a fist, but the cabin was empty. No driver, only a phone unlocked. Still on a call, Jason picked it up silent. He didn't speak, didn't breathe. But a voice on the other end muttered, "Is it done?" Jason stayed quiet. The voice came again, colder now. "Say something. Is he dead or not?" Jason hung up. Then threw the phone into a dumpster and vanished down the alley. Back inside the convenience store, the cops were just arriving. The girl, Emily, stood near the counter, answering questions with clipped nods. She hadn't said Jason's name. She wouldn't. Something in her gut told her that. He'd saved her and then disappeared like a ghost. But she noticed something as they wheeled one of the suspects out. The tattoo. She froze. The lead officer noticed her reaction and asked if she recognized it. She lied. Said it was just shock. But Jason's words echoed in her head. "You okay to talk to the cops?" And suddenly she wasn't so sure. 3 blocks away, Jason ducked into a low-end auto garage he knew from years back. It was owned by a man named Paz, old contact, off the books, the kind who never asked questions. Inside, the air reeked of rubber and diesel. Paz looked up from a stripped motorcycle and raised one brow. "You again?" Jason didn't respond, just nodded and asked, "You still got cold storage?" Paz led him to the back. Jason pulled the folded note from his pocket and placed it on a metal table beside a laptop. He scanned it again, looking for pressure marks, second impressions, and they were there. Emily had written more before she panicked and tore it off. He enhanced the indentations. A second message slowly appeared beneath the original. "It's not just me. They're watching my brother." Jason leaned back, exhaled. This wasn't over. They didn't want money. They didn't even want silence. They wanted leverage, and they were willing to use family. He turned to Paz. "You still got access to traffic cams," Paz smirked. "Only the ones that matter." Jason slid a photo of Emily across the table. "I need every frame of her leaving work the past week. Find the car that's always nearby." By nightfall, Jason had it, a grainy image, a silver sedan. Same corner every night, tinted windows, no plates, but a minor reflection off a nearby shop window gave Jason what he needed, a partial company logo on the rear bumper. A shell corp tied to a holding firm tied to a private contractor, level 9, the same group tied to Istanbul. The same one that branded its operatives. Jason's jaw set. They weren't watching Emily. They were watching anyone who got too close. Meanwhile, Emily sat alone in a police safe house, a plain room. One light. No signal. She stared at the ceiling, wondering if she did the right thing. Then the lights flickered, and the door creaked open, but it wasn't a cop, it was Jason. No one had seen him enter. He stood in the doorway, eyes calm, voice quiet. "Pack your things. You're coming with me." Emily hesitated. "Where?" Jason's reply was flat. "Somewhere they can't touch you. And somewhere I can make them wish they didn't try." They left through the back. Jason had already disabled the security feeds. He used a side route through a church lot, then a metro construction tunnel. No cameras, no chatter, just echoing silence and Jason's boots on gravel. By the time they reached his safe house, the city was asleep, but Jason wasn't. He was wide awake, planning, because this was no longer about protecting a girl at a counter. This was a declaration, and Jason Statham was about to respond. The footage looped again on Jason's screen, a blurry back alley in Queens, timestamped 2 nights ago. Emily's brother, Noah, getting shoved into a van by 2 masked men. No struggle, no resistance, like he already knew what was coming. Jason stood over the monitor, knuckles white. Every detail clicked into place. The level 9 insignia, the timing of the fake robbery, the van that was never meant to drive away. They hadn't been targeting the store. They had been drawing him out, and they had succeeded. Inside the safe house, Emily sat on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees. Jason dropped a photo on the table beside her, a still from the video. Her breath caught. "That's him," she whispered. "That's Noah." Jason didn't speak. He was already moving, pulling a burner phone from the gear case, pressing a number that hadn't been touched in over a year. The line clicked. A voice answered, cool and military. "You calling me means it's real." Jason's tone was pure steel. "I need to borrow the barn." No more words. The line cut. Outside the city, behind a fenced-in scrapyard with no sign and no records, sat a steel bunker known only to two people alive, Jason and the voice on that call. The barn was more than a safe house. It was a black site. He drove fast, Emily silent beside him, tension riding shotgun. By the time they reached the gates, night had dropped full and heavy across the skyline. Jason keyed a code into a rusted panel. Steel doors opened slowly. Inside, weapon crates, medical gear, comms jammers, and a wall lined with old photos, all crossed out except one. The one that wasn't was her brother's captor. Jason spent the next hour building the play, no calls, no outside help. Just one location pinged from the van's old GPS, a repurposed data center outside Rockaway, surrounded by empty docks, no guards listed. But that's what made it perfect. The place was never meant to look dangerous. It was meant to be forgotten. Jason didn't waste time. He handed Emily a secured radio and said one line before heading out, "If I'm not back in an hour, make noise." Then he was gone. The facility was old, windowless, a box of forgotten concrete and barbed wire, no motion lights, just the hum of power still flowing from some forgotten line. Jason scaled the back wall, disarmed the door sensor with a makeshift code breaker, and entered into black. Inside, the air felt recycled and old, like breathing secrets. Room by room he moved. One takedown in the hallway, silent choke, dragged to the corner. Two more in the stairwell, one knife, one elbow to the skull, security feed looped, motion sensors jammed. He was a shadow in a building built for ghosts. Finally he found it, a steel door, code locked. The monitor inside showed Noah tied to a chair, bruised but alive. Jason didn't hesitate. He rigged the hinges, set a charge, stepped back, boom. Metal shrieked. He entered with rage and precision. Inside the room, 5 men turned too late. Jason moved like a storm. The first hit the wall so hard the plaster cracked. The second pulled a gun. Jason broke his wrist and used it to knock down the third. The last two tried to flank. Jason threw the chair itself, with Noah still tied to it, knocking one man down, then vaulted over and landed a heel straight into the other's chest. It was brutal, precise, final. He cut Noah loose with one swipe. The kid looked up, dazed. "How did you find me?" Jason didn't smile. "I was in the neighborhood." They moved fast. No alarms, no resistance left, but outside, headlights, a convoy, 2 subs, 4 more men, the cleanup team. Jason handed Noah a phone and whispered, "When I say go, run to the left. Get behind the generator." Then he stood in the open, hands down, eyes forward. They didn't recognize him at first. Then one of them muttered his name. Their stances shifted from cocky to cautious. Jason didn't speak. He waited until the closest one moved. Then everything unraveled. The gunfire was fast, but Jason was faster. He ducked, rolled, used the sub's own door as a shield. Took one down with a wheel iron, another with a shot stolen mid-fight, blood on the asphalt. Noah stayed hidden. Jason never called for him. By the end, the parking lot was a battlefield of breathless silence, and Jason stood alone, bruised, bloodied, but standing. An hour later, Emily opened the safe house door to find Noah walking in behind Jason, alive. She ran to him, sobbing, but looked over his shoulder first. Jason didn't say a word. He just nodded once and turned back toward the night. In the final scene, Jason stood on a bridge overlooking the Hudson, breathing slow. The wind pulled at his coat. In his hand was the original note, the one from the cashier. He let it go, watched it fly. Because in a city full of threats, someone tried to write Jason Statham into a warning, but they forgot who he was, and now, they're the ones who should be afraid.